time, I'd like to introduce my two wonderful panelists. First, we have Marcel Jean-Shaw, Director of Financial Aid, University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And we also have Brian Lindman, Assistant VP for Admissions and Finance Aid, Macalester College. Both of you, thank you so much for your time today. I welcome you, and we are now ready to begin. So whenever you are ready, you can go ahead and take over.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alex. Thanks everyone for being here today. Hopefully you can see my screen if I'm navigating the Zoomiverse properly. And Marcel and I are going to take you on a bit of a whirlwind tour of financial aid this afternoon. We'll cover the topics you see on the screen. We'll go back and forth and give our different perspectives on these topics. And then at the end, you'll see a URL where you can look at these slides again if you like, so don't feel like you need to take notes. And you know, as Alex mentioned, hold your questions to the end, and then Marcel and I will leave a good amount of time to try to answer some of those questions for you. We're going to start by just kind of setting a bit of the landscape. Part of the reason that you're here for this session is that if you know something about college costs, you've probably heard that they've been going up. And so here's a chart and some statistics that kind of give you some of those numbers. This comes from the College Board's Trends in College Pricing report from 2019, which has a lot of data. If you are a data person, you'll enjoy this publication. But you can see just by sector what the average prices are for tuition and fees in the current school year, the one we're finishing now. Private nonprofits at $36,880, public 4 years, $10,440, and then public 2 years at $37,30 for tuition and fees. So that's the part of the story that you probably know well. But the rest of the story and what we are going to try to illuminate for you today is about the concept of net price and what people actually pay. So there is a big difference between what the published price is at an institution and what the average student pays at those institutions. On the right on this slide, you can see the average net tuition and fees, meaning the amount of tuition and fees that students actually pay after grants, scholarships, and tax credits are subtracted from the published price. And you can see that at all of those sectors, from the most expensive at private 4 years to public 2 years, the average amount of tuition and fees actually paid is quite different than the published numbers. So, and in fact, at public 2 years, the average tuition and fees is below zero. So we're going to talk about how you get from the left-hand side to the right-hand side and how you can get a preview of what your actual experience will be. Every presentation that I do always has one slide that has way too much information on it, and that's this slide. So don't try to understand it as we go through this today, but there's a lot more information about how the price of tuition fees, room and board has changed by sector. And if you're interested, the URL there at the bottom, collegeboard.org/trends, can give you a lot more information about those numbers. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to Marcel.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you everyone for coming out to the presentation. So as Brian said, there's a difference between the direct cost and the published cost. And this is where it gets a little bit murky, because you'll likely, when you get your financial aid package, you're going to see a much larger number than the published cost. And you shouldn't be alarmed by that either. That is simply the cost of attendance. And so as you can see on this slide, the direct cost to you as the student or the family is going to be tuition and fees, room and meals, books and supplies. But then we also factor in costs that we know will be associated with the degree. We know that you're going to want to go home for Thanksgiving or for the holidays. You may get homesick, and so we build in transportation and personal expenses, things, you know, computers, your laptop, and things of that nature. And so you're not paying the university or the college for those things. That is going to be in that larger price that you'll see, that's larger than the published price. And so on the next slide, I delve in a little further. What you'll see is that the cost of attendance is much higher. That's going to be the highest number that you'll see for any of the colleges or universities you're interested in. So in this case, we have it set at about $65,000 is what your cost of attendance is, but your actual tuition and fees, that's going to be your published price, is going to be hovering around $25,000, right? And then, as Brian alluded to, what you actually pay is even much lower than that. So just wanted to break that out, and I'll hand it over back to Brian.
So once you understand cost of attendance, we can then talk about the concept of net price calculators and some other tools that you can use to get a good estimate of what your actual experience will be. So a net price calculator is something that's available on every college or university website, and it's designed to be specific to you. You provide some information through the use of the net price calculator. It can be done anonymously, and based on the information that you provide in the net price calculator, you can obtain an instant estimate of what your net price at that institution might be. And so what is net price? Net price is defined as the difference between the cost of attendance, the estimated expenses for everything involved in providing an education for a year that Marcel just described, minus the estimated grants and scholarships that you would receive at that institution. And so this definition of net price is actually in the law. And so when you go to a net price calculator at one institution, net price means the same thing as it does when you use the net price calculator at another institution. And the idea is to be able for you to obtain apples to apples to apples comparisons of estimated net price at many institutions. And this is just meant to take some of the mystery away as you approach the college process. If you use a net price calculator, you will be arming yourself with more information than you can get until you actually go through the whole process of being admitted to an institution and obtaining an actual financial aid package. So this is, when I do a financial aid night, this is my #1 piece of advice. Go pick an institution, even if you don't know where you might be interested in, just pick one and run their net price calculator. And that can often be really illuminating, especially if you are in a situation where maybe you're the first one in your family to go to college, and you don't have any idea what to expect in the financial aid process. This can really be a good first step to helping you understand what your experience might be. The methodologies vary a little bit. Some of them are very complicated. Macalester College's net price calculator is quite complicated and asks you a lot of questions, but therefore it provides you with a very precise estimate. At some other institutions, it's more of a statistical model, more like a tool that says students who are like you received financial aid like this in the past. They're both valid and both should be very helpful, but just a little bit different approach. Now, a couple of other tools that you might be interested in, especially because they are somewhat less labor intensive. One that I like to use is called College Navigator. It's from the National Center for Education Statistics. If you search for College Navigator, you will find it in the Google machine or whatever your preferred search engine is. Their website looks a little bit like it came from 2003, but it has a lot of great information about everything from enrollment numbers to graduation rates, and relevant to our conversation today, it has a lot of information about net price for students who have attended those institutions in the past. So I took a screenshot of what the net price information for Macalester looks like. And you can see that it shows you 3 years of information. If you look at the most recent year, the 2017-2018 school year, at Macalester, our published price for tuition, fees, room and board that year was $64,136. And so if you just look at the average net price for those who received a grant or scholarship, they paid less than half of that. And then the other thing that's really great about this particular website is that it breaks down the information a little bit more specifically based on family income. So if you find your family's income range in the left-hand column, you can get some idea of what students who attended this institution and had family incomes like you actually paid to attend that institution. So this is really a good way to start to understand what your experience might be, even without entering any information about yourself into our website. And then one final tool, MyIntuition.org, is a nonprofit organization that provides a very quick estimate tool. There are only about 70 colleges and universities that use this tool right now, but it's growing. And the great thing about this one is that you can spend about 5 minutes, answer 6 questions anonymously, and you'll receive a ballpark estimate of what kind of financial aid you'd receive at that institution. So it's very easy to use, anonymous, and you can quickly start to see how you might imagine attending one of those institutions. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it back to Marcel, and we'll start talking about the types of financial aid.
Hey, so there are a number of scholarship and grant opportunities out there. A little fun fact, as of 2015, the U.S. Department of Education actually estimated that $2.5 billion in aid went unclaimed for FAFSA mistakes. And so there's a lot of aid to receive out there. And so we have loans. All loans are not created equal. We'll get into that later. You have student employment. There's different types of student employment whereby students can, again, as it indicates here, help themselves to pay for their college education. And then we have gift aid. So we have the meritorious aid, which is generally based on SAT scores, academic performance, athleticism, right? Those are going to be your merit-based awards. And then you have the need-based grants. And the need-based aid or grants or scholarships are going to be calculated generally off of a federal formula. There's a calculated need. So when you do your FAFSA and you enter in all that information and it spits out the EFC, the expected family contribution, that is the calculation that a lot of colleges and universities are using to determine exactly what your need is. And so these are the 2 major types and 4 subsectors of aid that is available to you.
I get to delve in a little bit on the best side of the pie, the gift aid side. So gift aid just means that it's the kind of financial aid that doesn't need to be earned or repaid. It directly reduces the amount that you need to pay to an institution. As Marcel was describing, they generally come in 2 families of need-based grants. Sometimes we use the phrase grant to relate to need-based gift aid. And we use scholarship to refer to non-need-based criteria that are used to determine eligibility for gift aid. But those 2 terms, grant and scholarship, are sometimes used interchangeably. And that's okay, because either way, if it's a scholarship or it's a grant, it reduces your bill the same way. But need-based grants come from many state governments, almost always for students who attend college within their home state, from the federal government through the form of the federal Pell Grant, and especially at high-priced institutions like mine, the institution is often a major source of need-based grants. On the scholarship side, as Marcel was mentioning, those are generally based on non-financial criteria, academics, athletics, talent, leadership, whatever priorities an institution or an organization may be trying to support will be the criteria that go into determining eligibility for a scholarship. And again, especially at higher priced institutions, the institution, the college or university itself, is often a major source of scholarship financial aid. And Marcel's going to talk about some other sources of scholarships.
So I get a good piece of the pie as well. So scholarships, again, we're talking about free money, money that you don't have to pay back. And so a lot of times throughout my career, people are asking, like, where is the money? And sometimes it may seem intuitive, but it isn't. And so I've broken out some of the hottest sectors for finding some of this free money. And so there are state awards. Most states have delegates and representatives that have pots of discretionary money. And so if you are living in a district, I encourage you to reach out to your congressmen, your delegates, your representatives, and just introduce yourself and say that, hey, I am attending college here. This is my career interest, and I would love for you to invest in my education. And I've seen it time and time again where students are receiving scholarships anywhere from $500 to $3,000 from their local officials, their local politicians. So you definitely want to check those out. And a lot of states, like the state of Maryland, has scholarship programs set up. There's the Maryland Higher Education Commission, where students can apply for formal scholarships. And so then you have civic organizations. If anyone in your family is a member of a fraternity or sorority, a lot of those organizations have scholarship opportunities. Religious organizations, I see a lot of book scholarships from religious organizations. The Thurgood Marshall College Foundation is the second largest scholarship agency in the country. And so they have a lot of scholarship and internship opportunities. I have a few students this semester who went off to intern for Exxon. Well, this was last summer, and they came back with $10,000 scholarships. So I encourage you to check them out as well. And then there's this new phrase that may be new to some, corporate social responsibility. These companies, they're companies in the Fortune 500 who have taken on the responsibility of saying, hey, we've made so much money serving the community that we want to give back. And so McDonald's, how many of us have eaten at McDonald's, right? You know, you've given that money for a Happy Meal. And so why not get some of that money back? You know, all of us, or a lot of us, have used Microsoft. We've paid for their products. And so this is an opportunity to get some of that money back in the form of scholarships. The same for CVS and Google. Google has tons of internship opportunities as well tied to their scholarships. So what I encourage people to do, particularly as it pertains to corporate social responsibility, think of the companies that you patronize on a regular basis, and inquire and do a quick Google search. You know, I was surprised to learn this semester from one of my students that Forever 21, the clothing store, has a scholarship. Who would have thought? So there is tons of money out there. In the next slide, this is not the so fun or pretty side, because everyone is scared of student loans. A lot of people are scared of student loans, but I'm here to tell you that all student loans are not created equal. And so they do break out. We have public loans for students. That's going to be your subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans do not accrue interest, any interest, while the student is in school. So if you borrow $3,500, if that amount is paid off while the student is in school up to 6 months after they graduate, all you have to pay is $3,500. You know, that's a great deal. And so if you do have to do loans, you know, that'd be a loan that I'd be interested in taking out, one that does not accrue any interest. It's not blowing up. Now, the federal government also does offer unsubsidized loans. And so as you have probably already figured out, these loans do accrue interest. But again, I want to drive home this point that all loans are not created equal, and that even these unsubsidized loans that are accruing interest, they're coming from the federal government. So the interest rate is going to be much lower than if you were to go out to your bank or your local credit union. And so these loans are what we would consider good, if you will, right? So the private loans, are the loans that you may want to be leery of or just borrow responsibly with. You want to do your research. And so the private loans are going to come through credit unions, banks, credit card companies. And those interest rates tend to be much higher. And as it pertains to repayment of these loans, they are not as flexible as the federal government. So the loans that come from the federal government are going to be the most flexible, the most forgiving. And there is a bevy of repayment programs through those loans. And just one more loan is actually it's continued on the next slide, is the Parent Plus loan. And so that is also a loan offered by the federal government. This allows for the parents to borrow on behalf of the student. So wherever there may be a gap, so your student brought in $10,000 worth of scholarships, they maybe got some grant aid, and then they took out their subsidized loan, but there still happens to be a gap there. The parent can apply for the Parent Plus loan. Studentaid.gov is where you would apply for that. And that loan will cover the gap for your student. And this loan is unique in that it can cover up to the full cost of attendance. So if you remember a few slides ago, I said there's this really large number, then the published price, and then the direct cost that you'd pay. You are allowed to borrow with the Parent Plus loan the entire amount. And so again, you want to borrow responsibly, you want to do your research. All loans are not created equal, all loans are not evil. All right, and so I'll get back into some fun stuff. I don't want to depress you guys. And so in the next slide, we're going to talk about student employment. There was a study done recently that indicated that students who worked at least or up to 20 hours a week throughout their matriculation actually performed better in the classroom than those students who did not work. And so this slide is pointing to the Federal Work Study Program that functions as a block grant program. So every college and university gets this block of grant money, and students can be employed anywhere from the cafeteria to the library to the gymnasium. And so anywhere on campus that staff may need a helping hand, students are permitted to work there. They get paid the federal minimum wage. The rules stipulate that they can work no more than 20 hours a week. And it's a really great opportunity for students to leave their university with work experience. So you earned money, you have something to put on your resume, you learn some transferable skills, and this is a really great opportunity. There's also, it goes by different names at different universities, Workship, and Workship is essentially institutional work study. So federal work study, that is money that's paid to the student through the federal, by the federal government. And then with institutional work study, a student can apply to be an employee, and it functions the same way. You would be getting paid to work in some capacity on the college campus. All right. I'm gonna kick it back to you, Brian.
Great. So then we want to talk a bit about how you apply for all of these great sources of financial aid. And here, I think it will be important for me to say that this will vary a lot from one institution to another. So most importantly, you need to check when you have a list of schools that you're applying to, check their own recipe for applying. But generally, you should be applying for financial aid at about the same time you apply for admission. And at our institution, for example, we are collecting financial aid materials at the same time that admission applications are being evaluated. And that allows us then to provide the financial aid result at the same time we provide the admission result. So those are basically the same time frame. Each institution will have their own deadlines. And so you need to check the instructions from each of those institutions. If you're thinking about 5 different institutions, you may have 5 different deadlines to consider. If you are a spreadsheet person, this is a great time to build one. Yes. There are many common ingredients, and we'll talk about those in a little more detail. And so, for example, if each of those 5 institutions all require you to complete the free application for federal student aid, they may each have their own deadline, but the earliest one is the only one that counts. So find the earliest FAFSA deadline, for example, and file by that deadline, and then you've met the deadline for all the institutions that you're thinking about. So with that, I think we'll just dive right into what's the most common requirement when you apply for financial aid.
Yes, so the free application for federal student aid. I want to emphasize the free. There are lots of scams out there, unfortunately, that I've seen some of my students succumb to. The FAFSA, as it's commonly referred to, is free. You go to studentaid.gov, and a lot of states are actually moving towards this, where you cannot receive any financial aid, institutional, state, local aid, unless you do the FAFSA. The FAFSA, again, has that calculation built in that allows us as the financial aid administrators to know how much it is that you need. It paints a financial picture for you and for us, so it allows us to help you better. And so that opens October 1st every year. October 1st is when the FAFSA opens up. So to piggyback off of Brian, you want to complete your FAFSA as soon as possible, if you can.
And then the other one that we'll just touch on briefly, because it's much less common, but there are about 300 colleges and universities that require another form called the CSS Profile, which is provided by the College Board. The CSS Profile, generally those 300 colleges are more expensive institutions that have a lot of institutional need-based grants to distribute. And so schools that use the profile feel that it gives them more information than just the FAFSA and allows them to make the best decisions that they can when they distribute their own institutional need-based financial aid. It asks all of the FAFSA questions and many more. Again, if this is an ingredient that's going to be required by an institution that you are interested in, it will be specifically listed in their own institutional instructions. If you're looking at a college or university and their instructions do not include the CSS profile, then this is not relevant and you don't need to deal with it. The only other note that I just make about the CSS profile is that at some colleges and universities, they require both parents to provide information in the financial aid application, regardless of their current marital status. So even if they have been divorced or separated for a long time, unlike the FAFSA, the CSS profile may require both parents to provide information in the financial aid application process. And often when that's an institutional policy, the CSS profile is the tool that they use to collect information from both parents. If you're curious, you can go to the website that's on the slide and it will show you the list of all the colleges and universities that require this form. So there are many other ingredients to a financial aid application, but we're not going to go into those today. I think what we'll do now is I'll turn it back to Marcel and we can start with some of the frequently asked questions.
Certainly. And so over the years, people have wanted to know, what do I do for the FAFSA? I heard I need my tax information and, people get frazzled. So what year's income do I use to complete the FAFSA? And that is going to be 2 years prior. So for the fall 2020, we're going to be looking at your 18 taxes, right? 2018. And so you're always going 2 years back. And so the reasoning behind this is that you should have, would have completed that your taxes by then, but you will need your 2 years previous tax information to complete your FAFSA.
Right, so then one of the questions that comes up, and especially in these times, is that because I'm reporting income on my FAFSA from 2 years ago, what do I do if my situation has changed since then? And so here we have a bit of a good news, bad news scenario. The good news is that colleges and universities do have the ability and the power to take changes and special circumstances into account. Financial aid officers are empowered with the ability to make a judgment about when something has changed and then to alter the inputs that go into calculating financial aid eligibility. So, for example, if we are talking at McAllister with a family where perhaps one of the parents has lost a job within the last 3 months in 2020, that's not relevant to their FAFSA. On the FAFSA, they're required to report their information from 2018. Mm-hmm. They don't have the choice to report their 2020 estimated income, but we can ask them for that, and they can provide us information about what's happening now. And then once we receive that information, we talk about it. We make a judgment about whether it's more appropriate to use their estimated 2020 income, for example, rather than looking back at what happened in 2018. Those decisions are made on a case-by-case basis, depending on the situation that the family is facing and depending on the documentation that they can provide to us. So that's the good news, that colleges and universities can do that. The challenge, I think, is that if you are a prospective student, if you are applying for admission and you don't know yet where you'll be going to college, the task before you becomes to present information about your special circumstances, about the things that have changed, to each and every one of the colleges and universities that you are interested in. And so that can be both stressful and a significant amount of work. And it's also certainly true that if, for example, you present that information to 5 different colleges and universities, those 5 different colleges and universities may have different answers. Each college has to make their own decisions, has their own policies about how they treat those circumstances. So you'll get some varying responses. But what I'd encourage you to do if you are facing something like that is to make sure that you are speaking up. Try to write a description of what's been happening in your family. Try to keep it to a relatively short kind of bullet point kind of description, and then provide it to the colleges and universities that you're interested in. That can be a dialogue then with the financial aid office to try to ask them, how do you like to receive information when things have changed? And they can guide you as to how to best go about that. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you, Marcel? Or?
Yeah, certainly. The financial aid appeal process is there for you. And so it's especially considering the times we find ourselves in now, where a lot of people have been recently impacted, but they were required to submit information, financial information from 2 years ago. And so the last question here is, where can I find listings of scholarships from non-institutional sources? And so, as I said before, Google will be your best friend. If you can think about businesses that you have patronized or that you love, just Google and see if they have a scholarship, Fuddruckers scholarship, Burger King scholarship. There's also a few years ago, the US Labor Department developed a scholarship search engine. And so you can go to the search engine and query out scholarships based on your region, based on your academic study, based on your gender. And so that is a really great tool because it is a repository of thousands and thousands of scholarship opportunities. So between that scholarship search engine and Google, you will be led, I'm sure. And you can always just ask your financial aid administrators of the schools that you're interested in or the school that you've decided to go to. To piggyback off Brian, have a dialogue with us. That's why we're here. We're here to usher you through this process of paying for school. And so if you reach out to us, we'll definitely be there and willing to assist you.
I'll mention a couple that I've heard from college counselors as well that might be helpful. Fastweb.com and scholarships.com, I believe, are a couple of services where students can sign up, create a profile based on many of the criteria that Marcel just mentioned. And then those organizations can alert a student when there's a scholarship that might be relevant to them. One piece of advice I've heard is that students should consider creating a new Gmail email address, or that's not the same as the one they use for school, for example, because there may be a lot that comes through that new email account, and it might be better to keep it separate.
That's true.
And from there, I think Alex is going to guide us through some questions.
All right. Brian, Marcel, thank you so much for running through your presentation. I'm sure that everyone in the audience is giving you a big virtual round of applause. You both did an excellent job today. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion. If we don't get to your question, please be aware that we do have a limited amount of time. So we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. So we'll just jump right in. Now I have a lot of questions have come in regarding the length of a person receiving a scholarship. So this particular person asks, do the scholarships you get during your first year apply to all 4 years of your college career, or do you have to reapply every year?
Okay, so I think it depends by school for sure. And so Brian mentioned something earlier about scholarships and grants being used synonymously. And so at my institution, UMES, grants mean that they're in perpetuity. So if you receive a grant, then this is something that you will get all 4 years. If it's a scholarship, then it's a one-time gift. But you want to have that conversation with your financial aid office and determine, you know, what is the length of this scholarship that you've received.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that. That I think is absolutely the right advice. It's going to vary, and when you receive an award, it should tell you, you know, how is this renewable? Should I expect it every year? Do I need to reapply? Now, you do need to fill out the FAFSA every year.
Yes.
So that's an annual application, and you get to do it each year that you're in college. So you can count on that. And any financial aid that's based on the FAFSA result, for example, the federal Pell Grant, is recalculated each year. So a student who's applying in the 2021 school year will be filling out the FAFSA with information about 2018. When they apply for financial aid for the 21-22 school year, they'll fill out that FAFSA with information from 2019. And if 2019 income is different than it was in 2018, then that student's federal Pell Grant eligibility may change. There are other factors that go into it. For example, if you have siblings who are in college, when more than one child in a family is in college, that can augment eligibility for the federal Pell Grant and for other kinds of financial aid. If that sibling is older and graduates, then when you apply the next year for financial aid, it could decrease your eligibility for a federal Pell Grant or other financial aid. So you know, the summary is it depends, but you should be, those are perfectly legitimate questions, and especially when you're presented with a financial aid eligibility notification from a college, I think it's really important to take Marcel's advice and make sure that if it's not obvious that you are asking the question of the institution, what should I expect for subsequent years? And they should be able to give you some guidance.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for that response. And to follow up a little bit, Brian, you had mentioned, and this was a very common question, is the FAFSA applied for each year? As you said, yes, you should be applying for the FAFSA each and every year. And just kind of to piggyback on that, when students are applying to schools, can or should we apply to college before we apply for FAFSA, or should they be applying for FAFSA first?
My answer is that they should be done simultaneously. And there could be some variation from one school to the next, but it's not required that you apply for admission first. So, you know, Marcel mentioned that the FAFSA opens each fall on October 1st. And sometimes students don't know which schools they'll be applying to by October. And in many cases, their list of colleges can change from October until they graduate from high school. So it's okay to file the FAFSA even if you don't know which schools you'll be interested in. You can always go back to, when you fill out the FAFSA, you can list up to 10 colleges to get the results of your FAFSA. If you do that on October 1st and you decide, oh, I only know about 3 colleges that I'm interested, you list those 3 colleges, file your FAFSA, those 3 colleges get your FAFSA result. If next month you realize there's a 4th college you're interested in, that's not a problem at all. You just go back to the FAFSA website and you add that college to your FAFSA. Then that new college immediately gets your FAFSA result. So you can do that as many times as you need to. So I wouldn't hesitate to file the FAFSA if you don't know which colleges you're interested in, if you don't know if you've been accepted. Don't hesitate, go ahead and get the FAFSA filed, and then you can always change which colleges have access to that information as things evolve.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. I will only add this little bit that as you're changing your FAFSA, please note that it does take 2 to 3 business days. So you can't, generally you can't go in today, make changes, and then go in tomorrow. You'll generally have to wait about 48 hours. And it takes that 48 hours or so for the school to be notified that you've added them to the FAFSA as well. So just a little reminder.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for jumping in on that question. Again, I have another question coming in regarding the CSS profile. Should we fill out the CSS profile even if it isn't asked for by a college?
The short answer is no. There would be no advantage to filling out the CSS profile unless it is required by the school. And in fact, you don't want to because there's a fee. So unless it's specifically requested by the school, the college or university, I would not go there. Unless you're really looking for something to do and I can think of a lot of other things that would be more fun. So I think you should probably not do that.
Excellent, okay. And now I do have a couple of questions related to, the current times dealing with COVID and such. How is student employment going to occur during COVID-19 when colleges are requiring to be virtual right now?
So I think that's another question where the answer varies. Mm-hmm. And so for us at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, when we cut the semester in half, we still paid our students, and a lot of them were able to do virtual work for their respective departments that they were in. And so I anticipate that if we are virtual again in the fall, we will still offer student employment and allow students to work remotely to earn that check.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that response. Now, just another question regarding COVID-19, and you're both more than welcome to give your opinion on this question, as it's kind of a very much open-ended question. Due to COVID-19, do you think federal aid will decrease, or will scholarships be less available?
No. The largest federal grant program is the federal Pell Grant, and it's an entitlement. So there's not a budget question. It's not a fund that runs out. Any student who completes the FAFSA and demonstrates eligibility for the federal Pell Grant will receive it. There are some questions about, will my new circumstances that have been affected by COVID-19 be accounted for in my 2020, 2021 FAFSA, and that's an institutional case-by-case decision. Mm-hmm. But it's not a question of money running out for the federal Pell Grant program. Now, for institutions like at Macalester, where over 90% of grants and scholarships come from the institution, that's a different question. And each institution will have its own response. What we're planning for is to invest much more in financial aid in the 2021 school year, because we know that many of our families will need more financial aid. But not every institution will be in a position to do that. So it really, unfortunately, doesn't have a very good general answer when it comes to institutional financial aid.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Excellent. Now, just moving on to some questions about tuition pricing. Does your net tuition price include loans that have to be paid back? So a student has taking out a loan, is that included in their net tuition price when they're looking at schools?
Nope. So when you calculate a net price, that's just the total cost of attendance minus grants and scholarships. So there is no assumption in the net price calculation that a student would be taking loans. Now, if they have a net price that's greater than 0 and they need a way to pay that net price, they can use the student loans and other forms of financial aid to help pay that net price. But the calculation of net price is assuming that no loans are a part of the picture.
Mhm.
Okay, and let me just take a quick look here. You're both doing an excellent job answering questions. So just give me a moment here while I try to find some additional ones that you guys can knock out of the park. Let me see here. Here's an excellent question about people regarding scholarships. When is the best time to begin applying for scholarships? Would you rather start applying before senior year, during, or even the summer prior to entering college?
My rule of thumb is the earlier the better. You should be applying, from your junior year into your first day of class at the university. That summer before you start is really, you want to maximize those 3 months, but that should only be building upon what you've been doing. Like I said, U.S. Department of Education said that $2.5 billion they estimate in aid went unclaimed as of 2015. So there's tons of money out there, tons of resources. You want to apply as much as you can. I tell my students, if you apply to about 3 scholarships a week on average, then you're doing good.
I'd just piggyback on that to say, I agree with that completely. And then it may, there are some cases where it pays off to continue that search even after you start college.
Yes.
Some scholarships are awarded to students only after they have a track record in college and maybe they've chosen a major. So, every year we have juniors and seniors at Macalester who are awarded major scholarships from outside agencies for the first time. So that can be, that process that you begin as early as junior year in high school really could continue all the way through 4 years of college as well.
Excellent. And I've gotten a lot of questions regarding some clarification on if you are beginning college in the fall, which tax return do you use on your FAFSA, the 2019 or 2018? So I know you kind of ran through, and I just want to reiterate for those who might have missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always 2 years prior. 2 years prior. So for those who are entering in this fall 2020 semester, we are looking for your 2018 tax returns.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Now, here's another question regarding financial aid and scholarships. Does the financial aid package get affected for a sport or merit scholarship? Essentially, if someone's receiving an additional scholarship, will that affect the financial aid they might receive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us at Macalester, the way that we work is that we first award our merit-based scholarships based on all of the information that's in a student's application for admission. And then if that student demonstrates need for financial aid beyond that merit scholarship, we will stack the need-based aid on top of that merit scholarship. So we think of the merit scholarship as the first building block in the financial aid package. And if there's need for more financial aid, then we'll put more on top of that. So they work together to meet the student's need for financial aid. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I believe that. It's good clarification on that. Thank you. Looking along here for some additional questions, I can see that there's some international students are curious what kind of financial aid options are available for them if they're applying to schools in the United States.
Yeah, so international students would not be eligible to fill out the FAFSA and would not be able to apply for the federal Pell Grant. So in most cases, international students would be relying upon financial aid from the institution itself. And there again is going to vary quite a bit. So, and in fact, I think it may be even more challenging for international students to get a preview, because net price calculators generally will not be helpful. So I think what I would say is that if its school offers significant financial aid to international students, that should be apparent from their website and from their admission materials. At our institution, for example, we're committed to meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need for every student we admit, including international students. And so that's prominently featured on our website. We want international students to know that. Other institutions that have robust programs of financial aid for international students will not be shy about sharing that information, but it's a little more of a scavenger hunt where an international student may need to really delve into the admission and financial aid materials from an individual institution in order to answer that question.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian, for that answer. Moving along here, I have another question regarding work study. What is the difference in working on campus as work study or off campus in a regular job? Any tax or financial aid decision-making differences? So essentially, is there an effect to your financial aid if you're doing a work study or just, working a regular job?
Yeah, that's a good question. So work study is going to be included on your award letter. That is a part of your award package. And so it's being counted towards your cost of attendance. And so if you have a job off campus, then, the Office of Financial Aid has, in most cases, no knowledge of that. And so it does not impact your financial aid at all. And so that's generally how that works. Now, there is off-campus work study through the federal work study program. And so you are able to get jobs in the community through the federal work study program. You don't have to feel as though you would have to go get a job at JCPenney's or McDonald's.
Add a couple other things. One question that when a student fills out their FAFSA, they're asked, so for example, in the 2021 school year, a student is asked, what was your income in 2018? And so fast forward a couple of years to when perhaps a student becomes a junior in college and they're filling out their FAFSA, some of their income from 2 years ago could have been from student employment on campus. But there's another question on the FAFSA that says how much of your income was from a need-based student employment position. And then the amount that was earned through that need-based student employment position is ignored in the FAFSA calculation. So they're treated a little bit differently in the FAFSA formula, but there also is a threshold over which a student has to earn over a certain threshold before their income counts at all in the federal formula.
Yeah.
So generally, I would say you don't need to worry too much about that distinction. I would say one difference about those two employment situations, though, is that if you have an opportunity to work on campus, many of the advantages that Marcel described earlier about getting to know the campus, having a supervisor on the campus who's not giving you a grade, is a person who can be a real resource for you, plug you into campus, help you get to know what it's like to be a student there. So there's sort of a lot of non-monetary advantages to being a student on campus that I think, sometimes we have to make decisions just based on the bottom line and where we can earn more, and I get that. But if you have a choice, there are some non-monetary benefits to working on campus as well.
Marcel, any last minute things to add to that?
No, I agree with that. I think, personally, I was a work study student, and that's kind of how I got in the vein of working in higher ed. So to Brian's point, the non-monetary benefits of that are numerous.
All right. Well, that does conclude all the time that we have today. This was a presentation on Financial Aid 101. I'd like to thank Brian and Marcel. You both did an excellent job on your presentation and answering all these questions that a lot of these prospective, future students have. thank you so much once again for taking the time, and I'm sure that everyone's giving you a nice virtual round of applause. Just a couple of last minute reminders, everybody. This video will be available to review tomorrow. So you can always go back to the Navigate 2020 site and go and find this recording to rewatch. Another last minute reminder, you can explore your college options in our virtual college fair. We have hundreds of interactive virtual booths where you can watch videos, download material, and even chat live with admissions representatives. You also find that some booths have schedules of their own live streams, so keep an eye out for those and make sure you get an opportunity to visit those if they're available. That does conclude our session today. Once again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Marcel, for taking the time to speak to all these students. And I hope you both stay safe and healthy and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.